Good morning everyone and welcome back to the Two-Headed Wolf gaming channel and Path of Exile 2 as today we continue to work on our Dual-Wield warrior. And if you are celebrating anything around this time, happy holidays to you. I hope that you have a good and relaxing time here at the end of the year, and I hope that you have some extra cash in your pocket so that you can spend it on what you want during the winter Steam sales. With this in mind, let's get started. For our passive skill points, I have 14 points right now, and there are so many nodes that I want to pick up. Like so many that I really have to figure out what do I want more from this entire selection. I have a node here which gives us 40% increased melee damage with hits at close range. Almost all of our attacks are at close range. There's only the Thunder ability, which you could say has the potential to not be at close range. But I've been mostly using this ability when I'm not able to reach a certain enemy or a certain boss because he's in lava or he's in a position where, as a melee character, I cannot damage him. So I've been using Thunder to attack him from a distance, especially useful when there are bosses which have energy shields. Because if you don't attack a boss with energy shield, at some point the energy shield starts regenerating. So using Thunder in order to at least stop that regeneration is really good. Then there are two nodes here which gives us 25% increased attack damage. There's another node here which increases our attack speed and increases our physical damage by 25%. There's another node here which increases our fire damage by 25%. There is this node here which increases our elemental resistance and increases our maximum elemental resistances. So as you can see, just a quick look here and there are already so many choices that we can pick up, plus some increased attack speed when we are getting hit, and we are getting hit quite often, so all of these are really good. I think first of all what I would like to take is this 40% increased melee damage with hits at close range. It happens very often and 40% is better than 20%, so we're gonna get two strength nodes here as well. Then I'm picking up a 15% increased melee damage with hits at close range, another 15%, and then the 40% one. That is going to be really powerful. I think the next points that I want to invest will be here. I want this 1% to all maximum elemental resistances and the extra 5% to all elemental resistances. My resistances right now are really bad. The penalties that I've been taking by going through the axe have been quite rough, especially in comparison to the gear that I found. And since I'm not upgrading the character at all until I start recording, yeah, you can see the imbalance there, especially for lightning damage. So I think I'm going to pick two more dexterity nodes on this side because on one hand we need it for our gear with armor and evasion, and on the other side it provides us with some accuracy, and I think that that can be very useful. And I am going to go down this node here to get maximum cold resistances, and yeah, we're gonna build on that resistance. Overall, I think this is probably the best choice for right now, until we can find some better gear that can help us refund some of these points and maybe invest them somewhere else. Finally, I have 3 more points and I'm very close to get an extra one from the level up, so I'm guessing that investing on this side to get 10% increased attack damage, another 10%, and then 25% is probably a really good choice, right? So let's pick this one up and we're gonna see how that works. For our skill gems at level 12, of course, I'm going to upgrade everything that we've used so far. But you also have to make a choice on whether we want Seismic Cry or Stampede. Stampede is an ability which makes us charge forward, cracking the earth and leaving a patch of jagged ground with every footstep. At the end of our charge, a massive living slam damages enemies and causes all nearby patches of jagged ground to explode, damaging enemies standing on them, while dual-wielding both weapons hit with 30% less damage. Overall, I don't want this ability with our current build, and I'll tell you why. Stampede sounds really good as an ability, and it seems like it's one of those situations where if we're building upon slam abilities, charging forward, doing a slam, maybe stunning the enemies, priming them up for explosion. Sounds like a really good idea. However, this is also a travel skill, and I'm thinking that what I would do is most likely replace it with or put it instead of Leaping Slam. However, I like Leaping Slam a bit more because by jumping, we can at times cross over terrain, jumping from one bridge to another, for example, or we could use it in order to get out of the radius of an enemy, even when the terrain is not perfect, right? It's not straight and it's not reversible by just walking on it, right? You need to jump over it. And Stampede seems like one of those abilities which you just charge forward, so the terrain has to work in your favor. And I don't want to run with this one with this build at the moment. Seismic Cry is an ability which I believe I want. Perform a damaging war cry, knocking back nearby enemies. If a heavy stunned enemy is hit, your next slam is empowered to perform an additional aftershock. If not, the skill cooldown is reset. Only counts heavily stunned enemies for purposes of counting power gained. This seems really good. We also deal 58 to 86 physical damage, so that sounds really good. I want to try this one out. At the moment, we do not have the ability to throw in an extra cry, an extra war cry. So we will need to replace Infernal Cry in this situation. So let's throw this one on. With all our skills fully upgraded, it's time to look at our buff skill gems. I have an uncut skill gem at level 12 and 2 at level 11. So I have to figure out which one of these skills has more value for us to be prioritizing, I guess, in the upgrade. Time of Need could be very valuable. It increases the amount of health that we recover when the blessing activates from 166 to 226. Herald of Ash increases the radius, the duration of Ignite, and also the damage that Ignite does. Could also be very powerful. Scavenge Plating would increase the amount of armor that we are getting from 3% to 4%, and it also would increase our Torn damage from 12 to 19 to 17 to 25. That extra percentage of armor, given that we can increase it or we can have 10 Scavenge Plates in total, it would mean that we're going for an increase from 30% to 40%. So that's a lot more than the amount of healing that we're getting every 10 seconds or so. So let's pick up Scavenge Plate first. For some reason at this point of the episode my mic stopped recording and I didn't realize it until afterwards. And so I decided to do this once again during the editing process. Things might be slightly off sync, image with sound, however don't worry, you're not gonna miss any important information. Up to this point, I decided to upgrade both the Armor Breaker skill and Seismic Cry to a third support slot. Armor Breaker is really good at defeating or at breaking the boss's armor, and Seismic Cry seems a skill which I would definitely want to use to debuff enemies and also hurt them in the process. For the Rolling Slam ability, you can see I have an extra support slot there. I decided to go with the main support gem. This one slows enemies down by 30% their movement speed and also reduces their evasion by 15. I am using the Rolling Slam in order to prime enemies for stun, and I'm using Bone Shatter in combination with Rolling Slam to cause that heavy stun to make the enemies explode. And so if I can use the primer, the Rolling Slam ability to reduce the enemy's evasion, then I can hit with the Bone Shatter more often. And thus, it helps me in clearing up mobs. So that's what we're using it for. For the Armor Breaker skill, so far I've been using Lacerate. Supported skills have 50% chance to inflict bleeding. I'm not really focusing on this one, and I wasn't planning to focus on this one in the past either. However, I had an extra slot open and I said 50% chance to cause bleeding and do a bit of extra damage is better than none, right? So that's why I threw it in, but I believe it is now time to move on from it. I decided to pick Break Posture first. Supported skills apply daze when fully breaking armor. Daze lasts for 6 seconds. And the daze ability increases the amount of stun buildup that we are causing. They will take 50% more stun buildup whenever we're using Armor Breaker, and this is really, really good. Between Armor Breaking and stunning the enemies, stunning the bosses, this can be a really good skill to have. And so we're gonna throw this one on. Then I'm gonna go for Demolisher as well. Support the skills break 40% more armor in combination with the Armor Breaker skill. You can imagine how effective this can be. And we're gonna be putting it to the test, but trust me, it's going to be really, really good. For Seismic Cry, since it is an AoE, I decided to throw on it the Blind Support Gem. Supported skills have a 100% chance to blind enemies on hit. Being blinded causes 20% less accuracy rating and evasion rating. So this is good both as an offensive capability and as a defensive one, and I felt like this is the best combo that I can get at the moment for our War Cry. Especially since we're not really focused on them being our main damage dealer, but more of a debuff. And finally, for our third support slot on Seismic Cry, I decided to go with Raging Cry. Supported skills grant 4 rage per 5 power of counted enemies in range. A really good ability, each point of rage provides us with 1% extra attack power. At the end of the day, it's playing really well into our Seismic Cry, into our War Cry's ability. With the skill setup complete, it is now time to get to gear. And I found a few good bases throughout my farming process. I threw it in the stash, and now I'll be crafting upon them in the hopes that I'll get something good out of it. I'm happy to say that I had some success with it, and I'm gonna show it off now. As per usual, I am going to read out only the modifiers that help us as a warrior or help our entire build. And we will start with this helmet. It's a really good upgrade, going from 62 armor and 54 evasion to 210 armor and 191 evasion. We're getting on top of that 122 to our maximum life, we're getting 18 to dexterity, increasing our accuracy, and in total 32% to our lightning resistance from the basic modifiers and the rune slot. So this is a really good upgrade, fixing some of our lightning resistances. For our boots, we're getting 10% increased movement speed, so that is pretty awesome. 52 to maximum life, plus 6 to strength, which will provide us with 12 extra life because we're getting 2 points of health per point of strength. I'm getting 12% to our cold resistances, 192 to stun threshold. I've been getting stunned quite often and I really need to think about building upon that. And I also get 37% reduced shock duration on us. Shock can be really awful. Once we're shocked, we're getting 20% extra damage from the enemies, and it lasts for 4 seconds. So if we can reduce the duration of this debuff by 37%, that is really powerful, especially as we're going further and further into the game. Then I have this belt, not super powerful, but I am getting plus 22 to strength. I am getting 24% to cold resistances and 29% to lightning resistances. Just because of these upgrades, I decided to keep this belt and we're gonna throw it on because it is an upgrade over what I'm running with at the moment. Resistances feel very important at this point of the game. Now let's talk about the weapon. I didn't manage to craft anything too exciting, but I found a better slim mace which I crafted into a fire damage dealing one. It's an upgrade over what we're running with at the moment. If we were to replace any of the weapons, we're moving from 1500 DPS to either 1700 DPS or 1900 DPS if I replace my secondary weapon. Overall, it's definitely a better craft than what I've been running with at the moment. But the story is not over here, because I found this shield which provides me with armor and evasion. It has a 40% block chance, which is really good. We're getting 21 to strength. Hits against us have 32% reduced critical damage bonus, and we're also getting 20% to our fire resistances. I decided to craft an extra 12% to lightning resistances using runes. So what is the story with the shield? And this is where you come in, because I was reading through your comments and one of you pointed out that I am losing on a very powerful defensive layer by losing the shield and not gaining a whole lot of value by going dual wield with one-handed weapons. And I kept thinking about it. Partially, of course, it makes sense. The shield can be a very powerful defensive layer, but I also thought that I am getting a lot of extra damage by using the secondary weapon. And so I kept looking through the setup, I kept thinking about it, and for me, these sort of pieces have to make sense. We're doing a lot of experiments throughout the episodes and trying to learn some lessons out of it. And so I was looking at the setup, and for the primary weapon set, I am focusing around physical damage and armor breaking skills. Because we're going dual wield, the armor breaker skill gets us a buff to attack speed, and so we're getting benefits of going dual wield. Our secondary weapon slot we're using in order to clear mobs, it's helping us clear maps. How are we doing that? Well, we're using rolling slam in order to prime enemies for a stun, and then we're using bone shatter to cause those heavy stuns and make enemies explode in the process. As I kept looking at it, I realized that I am not getting a whole lot of DPS out of it because when we're looking at rolling slam or bone shatter, we're taking a penalty to our damage to the damage dealt by 30% for each weapon. So we're not getting bonuses there. And that made me think, are we stunning enemies faster by going dual wield? Or is it pretty much the same value or close to going with a single-handed mace and a shield? And this is the important question, and this is what we're going to test out today. It's going to be pretty good. And to close this segment, I want to say a big thank you for all of your comments. I really love your ideas. Sometimes I might not agree with it when building this character, but I'm thinking about it a lot and I'm looking at my build and I'm trying to figure out what are some of my blind spots, am I missing something which is really big, and even if in the end I am not modifying my current build with the information I received, I am going to use it in future builds. So really, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with me. I'm hoping that through my experiments and through these ideas that I'm trying out, you can learn something from me as well. With the setup complete, it is now time to put it to the test. And I'm running right now with a single-handed mace and a shield. We're gonna try out rolling slam and we're gonna be using bone shatter. Since this is done post-recording, I already know what's the result of this experiment, so sit back, enjoy the show while I spoil everything for you and ruin the conclusions. But trust me, they're totally fine, you're gonna love it. Apparently, going with a single-handed weapon and a shield in order to use rolling slam to prime enemies for stun and making them explode with bone shatter works just fine. Pretty much on the same level as dual wield. I really thought that going dual wield might help us in increasing those stuns faster, helping us build those stuns. But maybe because mobs are very squishy and their stun threshold is not that high, it doesn't seem to make much of a difference whether we go with a single weapon or dual wield. If I had to think about it further, I think it would make maybe more sense to use rolling slam with dual wield if you focus around DPS. Maybe throw on the rolling slam an extra attack speed so that you can move faster. Throw in extra physical damage or fire damage or whatever element you're focused on. Maybe throw in a support gem which causes aftershock, because aftershock will cause that secondary DPS explosion, and maybe at that point going dual wield will make more sense. However, even that has a big downside because rolling slam will cause 30% less damage with each weapon if you go dual wield. So you're not getting a whole lot out of it. Maybe, if you go dual wield with two-handed weapons, maybe at that point it makes more sense. Still, I really love this experiment. I really love the fact that I got this suggestion and that I tried this idea out because, yeah, in the end, if you're not focused on DPS and you're focusing on secondary effects, apparently it's just fine to run with a single weapon and a shield. I guess the only downside is that now I want to add shield nodes on my wish list, and there are already plenty of nodes that I want to pick up, and we might reach a point where we will not be able to invest in them. I picked 25% extra attack damage from that level up, and I'm now fighting the end of the act boss. I have 67 cold resistance, so everything should be just fine. Just look how quickly I am breaking the armor of this boss, how quickly I pushed him into the negatives, how quickly I am stunning him. Overall, I might not kill him in 2 hits, but I think this is very powerful. What I am doing right now, the amount of damage, the amount of survivability that I have feels totally fine. I even remember that during the recording, I was talking throughout the entire fight, which means that I am pretty much relaxed, that I am not really worried about dying at all. At no point did I feel that I'm losing control, and I think that's the sign of a really good build. Since we have a little time on our hands, let me share with you part of the story at least of how I got into Path of Exile 1, what made me quit, how years later I rediscovered it, and why now I have over 3200 hours into that game. You see, back then when the game came out, I was really big into RPGs, ARPGs, and MMORPGs. And I think like most 90s kids, I started with Diablo 2, and as time went by and high-speed internet got introduced into my city, the world of MMORPGs pretty much opened up. And I used to try all sorts of games. What you need to know is that I was really big and really fixed into archetypes characters. So I enjoyed playing Crusader, go through the game, look at the different gears, trying out the different skills. Then I would make a mage, go through the entire game. I would make a ranger, go through the entire game. You get the idea. I was looking at different skills, I was looking at different gears, and that was very fascinating for me. And so when I installed Path of Exile 1, looking for another cool game, I played a Templar because I was a big fan of Paladins, Crusaders, that sort of class, and I got through the first area. I leveled up, I opened the passive skill tree, and my mind was blown. I was looking at that entire thing, and I was not intimidated by it, but fascinated. I was like, this is the entire skill tree just for this Templar? How about the others? So I exited the character, I created a new one, I created a witch. I got through the first area, leveled up, clicked on the passive skill tree, and I saw it was the same thing. And I created another character, got through the first area, leveled up, clicked on the passive skill tree, I saw it was the same thing. It didn't really matter that I started somewhere else. I was looking at that and I was like, what is the point of creating a different character class if they are the same? So because of that, I quit the game. I was like, this is boring. This is going to get boring really, really fast. I wanted to have those differences. And so I quit the game. I uninstalled it, and I remember having this thing in mind for a very long time, for years, that the game is boring, that there's nothing unique about it. I didn't get to active skills, support gems, I didn't get to understand that you can mix and match them to create all these unique things, none of that. And years later, I remember seeing people play Path of Exile 1 on YouTube, like watching these videos of builds just flashing through maps. They were really quickly, you couldn't understand anything. And because back then there were all these mobile games with a lot of pay to win mechanics, which looked very similar to how Path of Exile looked on those high speed builds, I felt like, yeah, this is not gonna be a game which I'm going to enjoy. That looks like, yeah, you get the idea, right? So for years I haven't touched it. And at some point during the development of Path of Exile 1, they moved on from having just 3 acts that you would keep repeating on higher difficulties like it is now with Path of Exile 2, and they moved towards having an entire story, like you go through the first acts and then you get to the point where you're defeating all of those gods, and then you get to maps. And I was watching, I remember it now as clear as day, that I was watching a guy called Quill18. He's a YouTuber, he also does Twitch stream at this point, And I was fascinated watching him play Paradox interactive games like Europa Universalis or Hearts of Iron or Crusader Kings, games like that. It was really enjoyable for me. I really loved his play style and the way that he talked about tactics, that sort of thing. During this particular league, he decided to make a YouTube series. He had previous ones, but I've never seen them. And he decided to create a Marauder, and he was talking about going with a totem build, and he was focused around the fire damage nodes, and he picked an ascendancy which worked with that. And I was fascinated about the game. Like, I had no idea that that was a thing in the game. And I found that to be so fascinating, and I loved his playstyle so much that when he stopped making that series, because I felt like he quit it way too early, like I wanted to watch so much more of it, when he quit that, I decided that I'm going to install the game, and I started looking for other YouTubers doing videos about Path of Exile. I remember to this day that I created the Duelist, Dual-Wield, with very fast attacks. I believe the enemies exploded or shattered when they died. I think it was with cold damage and freeze damage, which, freeze enemies in place. And when they died, they shattered. Pretty similar to what I have right now, right? It's not that far off. But that was really fascinating. I enjoyed the character. I think I have a video on my channel right now, but it's not from back then. It's actually from nowadays. As I visited that character, I still had it in my character list. I threw the points in the way that I fought back then from what I remembered. And I just looked at the character. I mean, I got through the campaign by dying a lot. I didn't know how to cap resistances. I didn't know any of that. So that's how I got into Path of Exile 1 again, and I kept playing it for more than 3200 hours at this point. It's fascinating how watching a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer's playstyle, or the fact that you like his explanation, or for whatever reason you like watching that person, it's fascinating how it can get you to play certain games that maybe you never thought about before. It's very interesting. I have a story in the future about how I didn't like Zizaran at all, and if you don't know Zizaran, he's a main Path of Exile 1 player, and I guess nowadays it's also Path of Exile 2, he rarely does other games. He's really good at it, he has a lot of knowledge, he also does a lot of events for Path of Exile 1, but I really hated him back then. I like him nowadays, but really this is a story for another time, because I think this is fascinating as well. But for right now, we're gonna be closing the story for today, and let me show you what armor I got here from this boss. It has double the stats of armor and evasion than what I'm running with at the moment, 397 armor, 359 evasion. I also get 29 maximum health, 14 dexterity, 16 to fire resistance. And because this armor is so good, I'm gonna throw on it 2 rune slots in order to get some extra resistances. We're gonna throw in some lightning resistance, and we're also going to throw in some cold resistance, because I hate getting slowed down. It doesn't really happen in this area, but I'm thinking that the extra cold resistance won't hurt in bad situation. And I'm also gonna throw in some armor shards, make sure that we're pushing that armor and evasion rating to the highest point that we can. But that is going to have to be it for today. I hope you have enjoyed it, even if it was a slightly weirder episode because of the technical difficulties. But I think in the end we made it work, we tried an idea out, it turned out to be successful. I share with you a story of playing Path of Exile 1. I would be very curious to hear your stories of how it was for you to try the game for the first time, or how you got back into it, or maybe how you got into Path of Exile 2. Who knows? I'm sure you have interesting stories as well. But with this in mind, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the episode, do consider leaving a like, it would be much appreciated. If you want to support me further, you can do so over on Patreon. And until next time, thank you very much for watching, thank you very much for your support, thank you very much for your comments, your likes, your subscribes, and everything else. And I wish you all to have a wonderful day.